Hey, welcome back to Rust Order Garage. It's another smoker hot today. Holy smokes. I had to go to a tank top. I think I'm on like shirt number 3. But anyway, we got the power brake booster in, pedals in, gas pedals in. Let's try to do something else here. Maybe steering? All right, before steering, let's update the list here because I keep forgetting to do it at the end of the video. So I'm just going to call that brakes. No. Brake pedal. Booster. And I'll say gas pedal. Now, all that stuff came from the 2001 Silverado, so for me, it cost nothing. It's all from the donor truck. What do you think that would cost at a junkyard? Do you think it could really cost $75 for all that? I have no idea what they charge for that stuff. $25 for a pedal set, $25 for a power brake booster, and I don't know, $15 for a cable? The $65? I have no clue. I'll call it $75. But I really don't know. Anyway, if I call it $75, that brings the truck value to $35 and $40. $4,040. But my out-of-pocket stays the same because it didn't cost me anything. It's off the 2001 donor. And that means I am still at $1,280 out-of-pocket. So already, yeah, it's worked out really well. Having parts around and using donor vehicles works good. So right now I'm at $1,280 out of my pocket as far as cash goes. And we call the value on the truck right now $4,040. I lost part of my video, so now I'm outside redoing it. This truck's outside. I'm using the lift for something else. I got to get an engine. I have a Suburban. So anyway, for the steering column, it should be pretty straightforward, except for, you know, building something like this. This is not a snap together. So it's not like I'm going to use a factory column. So I've got to figure out what do I want to use that's reasonable, that I have on hand, because I have a bunch of columns on hand. You know, do I want a tilt wheel? Do I want column shift? Do I want floor shift? And I have to, you know, make that work with what I have, because you can buy, you know, aftermarket columns on eBay or whatever for anywhere from $150 to $200. And I guess the price is right, but my concern with them is because I know for a fact that those columns, they're all tilt. You can get them with or without the ignition on them. But the joint where the steering column swivels and where you steer from is plastic in those cheap columns. I'm not talking about like made in USA, I did it columns, that kind of stuff. These are the offshore stuff. It's plastic. I'm not sold on that as far as safety. I've never used one, but if you want to look for what's safe and what isn't, look to the Australians. Those guys have to get everything engineer inspected that they build. Not like here in the US where I've seen some stuff beyond sketchy on the road that shouldn't be on the road. But the Australians actually research this stuff, and it's part of their engineering inspection. And I've seen papers from them on these steering columns where that joint has loosened up. It's basically like a ball in a socket, and the socket loosens up, and the ball can move, and that is not safe. So I really didn't want to use one of those columns. If you have, that's fine, and I hope you're safe. I don't really trust them, and I don't have the money in this budget to be spending $500 on a steering column. I wouldn't do that anyway. I would use an OEM column before I would buy aftermarket, because it's usually cheaper. I get them at swap meets from $25 and up. So since I'm going to use what I have on hand, we have compromises. Ideally, I would have a early style column without the ignition switch, because I don't want the ignition switch on the column on a 56 Chevys. Just choice right now. I know the ignition switch in the column is nice because it locks the wheel. It's good for security, sort of. But for the style of this truck, I want an early column, no ignition switch, with a column shift, tilt would be nice. And looking through what I have on hand, I don't have that package. I can either go straight column with a column shift or tilt wheel, and I have to get a floor shifter. And as far as a floor shifter in this, you know, I could put like a Camaro shifter or something in it, but I really didn't want to do that. I'm trying to keep a certain, I don't know, hot rod theme to this, but not that kind, you know, like almost like a day two type thing I've been thinking of. So maybe like a low car type shifter would be cool, but you know what? Those things are freaking $500 as well. So it's like, I don't think I'm going to do that. That's, again, I can't wrap my head around these prices. That's just insanity. So that's not going to happen. And then the other thing was I fitted up a few different columns that I have around, and I threw a tilt wheel in there just to see what it would do, and it didn't have a shifter, so I would have had to buy a shifter. But with these trucks, the steering column angle is pretty steep, and the way the tilt wheels work, most of the tilt is in the up direction. So there's only like one click down. So if I put a tilt wheel in this, it's really barely anything. So tilt, not a necessity. So that was kind of like, not really, don't really have to have a tilt wheel. So major points for me: early column, no ignition switch, has to look right. And the other thing is, I didn't want to put like a late model type column in it, because the thing with these trucks is the whole underneath of the dash is open. You can see everything. So I didn't really want the ignition switch there and any other extra wiring, just the minimal stuff under there, so at least it wasn't too ugly. And yeah, it'd be nice to buy a new column that was all clean and everything, but it's not in the budget. So we work with what we have. So let me show you what I finally decided to use and how it works out. All right, this was the final decision. This is a 1967, I think, Impala or Caprice steering column. I got this for free. Nothing's ever really free, but it was given to me. Why? Because it was messed up. It had no shifter lever on it, so that's why it doesn't match so much. I pulled that out of another junk column, and there's a spring in here that works with this and keeps it locked in park so the column doesn't rotate. Spring was broken and messed up, so I had to take this whole column apart, stick a spring in there again out of another column that I'll just turn into a floor shift, and make it all work. I had to drill out the hole in there for the spring because they changed sizes over the years. It was a lot of work. But now I have what I think is a cool steering column that fits the era of this truck. And I'm even thinking about keeping this 67 wheel and just filling the cracks and painting it, because of course everything is going to get painted. I'll get rid of this. This was the gear shift indicator for the Impala. So whether I put one up here or not, I don't think it really matters. You're just going to throw it in drive or reverse anyway, and everybody knows where those are. I don't even think anybody looks at those. Under the dash is pretty clean. All you have is a neutral safety switch down the bottom, which I really don't use, or I can use or not use, depending on how I wire the truck. And I have the wires for the turn signals. That's about it. Otherwise, it's a pretty clean looking column. I'm still keeping the factory drop. I'm going to make some mounts. I unbolted this. This was bolted to the bottom of the column for the factory mount. I'll make a couple brackets that bolt into the factory points and then tie into the column drop there. So I think that will work really nice. The angle is good. The other thing I spent a lot of time with was sitting in the seat. What was comfortable as far as steering angle. I think this is a good compromise. It's not too much like a bus, and it's not too low that you can't get in and out easily. And if you drank too many beers and you got a big gut, you can still get in. So I think that'll work pretty good. And on the bottom of the column, there actually used to be a swaged on flange here that would attach directly to a rag joint, because the steering box was right around there, I believe, on the earlier Impalas. And after cutting that off, I found that it was actually 1-inch 48 spline in there, which is cool because this U-joint fit. And I already Loctited the set screws and drilled the dimples and such for that, because this one's not coming off. But let's talk about that now, including something you probably wouldn't think of with steering, and that's U-joint phasing. All right, so connecting your steering, simple enough, right? Couple U-joints, some 3/4 double D shaft, and off you go. Well, not so fast. One thing you want to remember when you do this is you want these U-joints to be in phase. And what that means is, if you look at the joint, this is the one that's going to go down on my my steering rack. But say this section is sticking up, going up to my steering column. You're going to want the one coming down to meet it like this. Sorry, like this. Notice the orientation of the flats. They're going in the same direction. This one and this one. That's called in phase. If you put this together like this, with the flat here and then the opening and the flats are on the sides, that's out of phase. And what happens is, when it's out of phase, instead of turning smoothly, it actually will kind of oscillate. It will not be smooth, and it causes problems. It's the same thing when working with a drive shaft, when you're making a drive shaft. You got to keep the joints in phase. So when I assemble this, I will assemble it like that. And there'll be some more things to talk about here. So I have my steering column, what I think is pretty straight. And I'll have my steering rack, where I think it's pretty straight and even. And now I have to put a piece of 3/4 D in here. Now, the thing is, when you cut the length of this shaft here, you want this to be long enough that it can't fall out. You don't want to cut this too short. And what I mean by that is, like, I can't just put this in here right now. It's too long. Even if I slide this all the way up into this U-joint, I can't fit it together. It's too long. But if I take this joint off and push this all the way up in here, like that, now I'm all the way up on the shaft. I can just get my lower joint in. So now when this is loose, there's no set screws or nothing, this 3/4 shaft slides back and forth, but it can't come out. That, you do that for safety, because even though you're going to put set screws in and Loctite everything, God forbid something loosens up. If this falls down because your set screws loosened up, you don't want your steering to fall apart. This would fall all the way down, and still you would have steering. You'd notice maybe a little looseness in it to get out there and take a look at what's going on, but the shaft cannot come out. The only way that's coming out is if you physically take this lower joint and remove it from the rack. Then you can disassemble the system. So please keep that in mind when you do this. So now that we've done that, one other thing you want to keep in mind is, when you have the shaft in your joint, you don't want it jammed all the way in there like that, because it will impede movement. Okay, the shaft, the U-joint can't move with the shaft near, so you want to set your length so that you have clearance for the joint to move everywhere. So when I put this together, like that, now the shaft moves back and forth. I'm going to set it so it's pretty even on both sides, and I can see that it's not going to impede any movement. Then what I'm going to do is start putting my set screws in. What we're going to do is tighten these set screws down as hard as we can to leave a mark on the shaft. Then we're going to take the shaft back out and drill it with dimples so that the set screws, when you put them in for the final time, have something to grab onto. And then even if they did loosen up, the shaft shouldn't fall back and forth unless the set screw falls out completely. But again, because you made the right length of shaft, you're safe. All right, I've got the set screws tightened in there. I have not removed anything yet to drill anything. I just want to make sure that everything turns smoothly. I have no issues. Notice the phasing on the shaft. You have the outside of the U-joint flat here, and then same thing on the bottom, the flat down here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's correct. And I've got a drain pin under it in case I lose any fluid that might still be in the rack. Let's see what it looks like. It looks good, feels good. So now I'm going to take this back apart and we'll drill the shaft for the dimples. All right, I got the double D shaft back out. I marked it top so I know which way is up. Little arrow marks for where they fit into the joints. And you see you get these little marks on there where the set screws screwed in. We're going to drill those out a little bit. That's all I need. Just something that'll, don't have to drill too deep. Just, you know, enough for the set screw to get something to dig into. There's everything all assembled. Works good. Lock nuts are not tight, and no Loctite on any of the set screws yet until the final assembly, because this is just mock-up, make everything for the truck. And of course, then we'll blow it apart and paint the frame and everything. But that's that for that. Now, come in here and make my mounts for there. All right, so it has been a few days since I finished the stuff under the hood for the steering, but now I'm working on this under column mount. So I changed my mind and I removed these factory welded on brackets, or whatever you want to say, mounting points, and I'll have to weld up those holes. But what I'm doing is I'm taking the original lower column mount and extending it, because this column is a larger diameter than the original, so I'm making it a little deeper so it'll still work. And then hopefully once those holes are welded up on the steering column and this is back in, it'll look somewhat factory, or at least not be ugly. So get that welded up and mock it up. That'll work. What I think I'm gonna do is put, this is gonna go away, a piece of exhaust tubing or something I'll put around the column if I have something that'll work to cover up this section. Then that'll pretty that up. And then the bottom here, I got to weld up these holes in the column that are left over. And after that, I think it won't be too ugly and should work. I have to extend my plate here a little bit to cover up a little parts of the hole there. That's no big deal, but I'll do all that once the steering column is out. So that is it for mock-up of a steering column. All right, so with the steering done, and look at me, I'm sweating. It's hot out. add a couple more things to the list here. So first off, steering column. Now, as far as value, I bought these things from anywhere from $25 to, I don't pay more than, I wouldn't pay more than $50 for that at a swap meet. However, people are crazy. You know, I see them listed online on like Marketplace for $150, which is nuts. I think that's nuts. But I'll call it $100. I'll split the difference. I'll say it's worth $100 for the steering column and the wheel. Now, it didn't cost me anything. It was given to me. I bought a posi rear end from a guy who had a bunch of 67 Impala parts, and he gave that to me because it was broken. So I had to fix it, but that didn't cost me anything to fix, just time. So, oh, and I forgot to, I have to go back to this. So add $100 to the value. But before I do that, I forgot. I wrote this down because I keep forgetting. I sold the grill and towing mirrors that came with the gold truck that I had scrapped that gave up the engine and other stuff. So that is, I think that's everything I have left for that truck. I might have one or two small things. That's it. But that was the majority of it. And I got $60 for that. So I took that off the cost in my pocket. The truck value was still $40.40, but out of my pocket went down to $12.20. Now adding the steering column in, truck value will go to $41.40. Out of my pocket, again, it was free for me, so I'm at still $12.20 out of pocket because I'm trying to use up what I have laying around, and I have a lot of stuff laying around. So the less I can spend, the better, and it helps clean up. So I'm at $12.20 at truck cost out of my pocket. Now the other thing we have, and I got to flip this over. I don't think I'll have to get a new piece of cardboard because I don't think anybody will be able to read this. Let me split this line again. So the steering linkage, 2 U-joints, and the double D shaft. I had, let me write that down. Steering linkage. That stuff cost me about $75 for the 2 joints and a length of double D. So that's $75, cost me $75. Truck value goes to $41.40 plus $75. So what do we got there? $42.15. Is my math right? $42.15, right? Because it would have been $41.75 plus another $25, $42.15. Okay, and then cost out of my pocket, I'm at $12.20. We'll add $75. So now we're at $12.95 out of pocket. So right now, for everything that's in the truck, as far as parts, I only have $1,300 out of my pocket. If I had to buy all this stuff separately from swap meets and wherever, I'm guesstimating about $4,200. But my $12.95, I'm still way under my $5,000 budget, and that's the goal. All right, I think that'll be it for this one. As I said, I'm trying to do one video per like sub project of the truck so I can keep track of stuff myself. And if anyone wants to go back and look, they can. Anyway, when I come back, I think the next thing I may do, we're getting down to the point where it's going to be time to get this cab off and start building, you know, painting the frame and all that kind of stuff, boxing the frame, that stuff. I think maybe the last things to do will be exhaust, maybe at least the first part of the exhaust so I can figure out how that's going to lay out. And for the HVAC, where my lines are going to go through the firewall, I bought a bulkhead to mount up for the heater lines and the AC lines. And then I'll know where all the holes in the firewall are that I got to fill because I want to get that cleaned up. And then decision, I have made the decision as far as wiring goes on this. I am going to reuse the 2001 Silverado engine and transmission harness. I am going to modify it for standalone, but I'm going to do it differently than I've seen most people do it. I'm going to try to do it in a much simpler way. At least I think it'll be a simpler way. It'll be my first time trying it this way, but I think it'll work out. I know it'll work. I think it'll be a pretty straightforward, easy way to do it if somebody wants to do it without having 2 days of work in it. I think that'll be good. We'll try it, see how it goes. Other than that, I know I'll forget something. But I guess that's where I'll end it here. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate everybody following along. And we'll see you on the next one. See ya.